This podcast is sponsored by Fastly. Fastly CDN, WAF, Load Balancer, and Image Optimizer were built by developers for developers to deliver sites and applications quickly and securely. We integrate seamlessly with your existing stack and workflows for increased insight and control. Test up to $50 of traffic for free at fastly.com/signup.
Hello and welcome to the InfoQ podcast. The InfoQ podcast is focused on discussions with software leaders, architects, and engineers shaping the software we use today. My name is Wesley Reisz, and I'm a software developer who chairs the English-speaking QCon software conferences held in London, San Francisco, and June 26 to 28 in New York City. Today we're talking with Martijn Verburg. Martijn is the CEO of jClarity. jClarity makes a product called Illuminate, which is a best-of-breed APM tool driven by machine learning. Additionally, he runs a distribution list called Friends of jClarity, which is focused on being an open community of performance tuning experts where other people can join and ask questions, a really cool community. He's one of the members of, or one of the co-founders of the London Java users group, which has something like 6,000 members. They're also extremely well known for the VJUG, and he is also finally a member of the JCP Executive Committee. Today's podcast deviates a bit from the standard podcast we normally do on this show. Today we're talking to Martijn about the Executive Committee's recent no vote on the Java Platform Module System, better known as Jigsaw, one of the major features that are coming with Java 9. There's been a lot of attention-grabbing news posts and rumor about this vote. So what we wanted to do was just take a few minutes and level set to talk to someone directly from the committee to understand what's really going on, what's really at stake. In this podcast, we chat about what the no vote really means, what the issues and concerns are, what some of the things that are still open. We talk about how Mark Reinhold, the JPMS spec lead, is moving forward. We talk about some of the resolutions, and we even talk a bit about the process itself so we can all grok a little bit better about what's happening with the platform. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I really hope you enjoy the podcast. Welcome, Martijn, to the InfoQ podcast.
Thanks for having me.
A few days ago, there was a pretty big vote that kind of shook up the Java community a bit. The Java Platform Module System, JSR 376, better known as Project Jigsaw, was voted down for the Executive Committee. So just to start this podcast off and get this out of the way right from the very beginning, was the no vote on the 8th a rejection of Jigsaw or a vote of no confidence in some way of modularization?
No, definitely not. If people read the comments carefully from all the members that did vote no, and any member who votes no has to provide some solid reasoning, that they will see that a vast majority of the people who voted no are actually pretty happy with Jigsaw. Right. They strongly believe modularity needs to come into Java to allow Java to run on cloud environments, to run in microservice environments, to run on Docker containers and smaller environments, and to do that in a more secure manner,
right,
in a more flexible manner. So it sort of sets the plumbing, as it were, for future Java releases, 10, 11, 12, so on and so forth.
Okay, help me understand that then. If you read your feeds, you see articles like Oracle crushed in defeat as the Java world votes no. If it wasn't a vote of no confidence, then what was the no vote about?
What the no vote was really against, this is my opinion and that of the LJC and many others, was that the community at large simply hadn't had enough time to test the specification out properly.
Right.
And because the specification is such a core plumbing specification, if there is something wrong, if there is something fundamentally flawed in that specification, then it's incredibly difficult to roll it back.
Right.
And so we just felt that more testing needed to happen around several of the edge cases, and we needed to see major parts of the ecosystem such as Maven, the OSGI folks, JBoss modules folks, and other various build tools, and the Eclipse compiler team, for example, needed to sort of try the specification out and just make sure that there weren't any blockers in there for them.
Why? There's been plenty of cases where there was a yes vote with a list of exceptions. Why specifically was no so common on this particular JSR?
I think because modularity itself is very, very hard,
right,
and it was quite clear from the expert group mailing list and associated mailing list, so the actual Jigsaw dev mailing list, which is the sort of the default implementation for the specification, is that there seemed to be still an awful lot of open threads where people were either unsure or they were stating they hadn't tested things out as far as they would like, and there were more than, say, 5 or 6 of these threads floating about.
Right.
So it really was a case of it's very close, but it just wasn't quite ready yet.
Right. Okay, well, let's back up. Let's start off, talk about what Jigsaw is and what it means for the Java developer. The Java Platform Module System, or Project Jigsaw, is the idea of breaking the platform down into smaller pieces for improved security, maintainability, performance. There's a lot of references to kind of the original project scope in the discussion going on right now. So let's start there. What was the original scope of Jigsaw?
So the original scoping for Jigsaw was to provide a modular Java, or in particular a modular runtime. And it was initially very much aimed at providing a modular system for Java itself. So an awful lot of work was done, even starting back in Java 7 timeframe, to actually do work to modularize Java itself. And much of that work had actually been done by Java 8 release. And that laid the foundation for things like Compact Profile 1 and 2 and 3, which a few people used out in the community. But it sort of laid some of the groundwork.
So as a Java developer, what do I get? What benefits do I get from modularization of the JVM?
What it's providing is an awful lot more security around the core usage of Java. So sort of threefold, or perhaps twofold. It hides a bunch of internal APIs which are considered to be not very safe to use for the day-to-day Java developer. There is a missing gap there in that they do need to provide safe alternatives to some of the common functionality that Java developers do want, but they have made this sort of security decision to hide away, in some Java internals that had been used for nefarious purposes, without giving away any extra security details there.
Yeah.
There's certainly a very strong commitment to creating a smaller Java at runtime. Java itself is now split into much smaller modules, with a much stricter relationship between those modules. It's what they call a directed acyclic graph. It means that by using a tool called JLink, which is coming in Java 9, that people can actually deploy their applications on a much smaller runtime, which only contains the parts of Java that their application actually needs. So a classic example will be that any server-side application will not need Swing, it will not need AWT, it will not need any of that client-side stuff. So I can just completely disable that as part of the runtime. And that will allow Java really to run on much smaller devices. It'll allow Java to start faster, so on and so forth.
Makes things a lot easier for cloud deployments and things like that. Makes sense.
Exactly, yeah.
In concrete terms, what does that mean for RT.jar?
Well, RT.jar is actually going away.
Yeah.
So that's disappeared. One of the things that the new module system is bringing, and I'll sort of backtrack here a little bit. One thing that needs to be made very, very clear is that the class path and the existing way of doing things is not going away.
Okay.
So if you want to take your existing Java application, deploy it on Java 9 using the normal class path mechanism, give or take a few small other glitches because of other changes in Java 9, you should be able to run just fine.
What I just heard you say was that when you go to Java 9, you're not forced to use Jigsaw. You can choose not to use modularization in 9 if that's what you decide. Did I hear that correct? Absolutely correct.
Yep. And that's a major misconception which has gone out to the whole ecosystem, which is something we're all going to have to work hard to correct. I think we're going to see the class path live for a very, very long time.
For good or bad, right?
For good or bad. I would not be surprised that, come Java 15, that the class path will still be there.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second. What happens to the class path when you move to Java 9 and assuming you're using the module system? What happens to the class path?
The new thing that's coming is this idea of having a module path. You can see that as sort of as a side-by-side replacement for the class path. And it's this new, much stricter construct, which is what is causing consternation amongst OSGI folks and the JBoss modules folks. The module path mechanism and the interactions of how modules connect to each other at runtime and discover each other at runtime and can form cycles with each other at runtime is much, much stricter in Jigsaw and than it is in OSGI and JBoss modules. So what the JBoss modules and OSGI folks are saying is that it is too restrictive for them to use,
right,
or to use effectively, and that is kind of the sort of clash between the two opposing points of view there.
That wasn't the initial scoping, though, right, of Jigsaw. It was, I understood it at least, that it was to kind of break down RT.jar into kind of these modules. It wasn't so much to work with OSGI and with JBus modules, right? Is that?
That's correct. So I think most people should see Jigsaw and the module system as it stands today as very much being a module system for Java itself.
Right.
It's certainly a module system that application developers can also use today to modularize their own applications.
Right.
But it was not designed to have strong compatibility with either OSGI or JBoss module. However, the JSR did state it had some goals, some sort of rough goals in there that it would, basically try to minimize harm to the ecosystem at large.
Okay.
And I think that's the counter argument that the JBoss modules and OSGI folks are saying, is that under its current form, it will cause harm, and in that they don't believe they can effectively deploy their module systems on top of it.
I got you. Okay, so I missed that part. I see. I mentioned during the introduction that I've been a Java developer for many years, but to be honest, aside from just a basic understanding of the JCP, it's a process that I really should know a lot more about. There's probably a lot of people out there kind of like me. Can you take a minute and explain the role of the executive committee in the Java community process and what the whole thing looks like?
So we meet face-to-face 3 or 4 times a year.
Yep.
There's actually also a monthly telco, so that's another 12 calls we have, and there's regular discussions that happen on the EC mailing list. So it's definitely more of a continuous activity than a point-in-time activity.
Okay.
Voting periods can come up whenever JSRs go through their normal life cycle, so they're not tied to any particular face-to-face meeting, etc. But all EC members are expected to vote on each JSR as it comes through. Right. On each stage.
There was a post by Tommy Tribe, for example, that said there's still 2 or 3 more votes ahead for Jigsaw. What does that mean? If we're voting now and there's this 30-day window, why are there still 2 or 3 more votes ahead?
That's right. So when a JSR goes through its life cycle, it goes through several stages. The stage that Jigsaw was just recently at is called the public review stage. But there are actually further votes that happen after that. So there's a proposed final draft stage in particular, which Jigsaw would still go through before going GA effectively. So even at this stage, you can get the stages if you just go to jcp.org. It sort of lists the stages and shows the life cycle there. But that's what Tommy Tribe was referring to. Even though there was a no vote at this point, certainly doesn't mean it's the end of Jigsaw at all, because there's still several votes to go.
This no vote basically says in 30 days there has to be a revote, correct?
Yeah. So the expert group and the spec leads can optionally they can choose to do this, to resubmit within 30 days, and that will allow us to vote again. And assuming the vote is yes this time, then the JSR just continues in its lifespan, and it will continue on to the next phase.
What if there's a no vote?
If there's a no vote, then according to the official JSR rules, this JSR is killed, effectively.
So should we be concerned?
I certainly don't think so. If you looked at the no votes, most of the no votes said that they had seen already a bunch of issues being resolved during the voting period, and it was just a case of needing, another, let's call it up to another month worth of actual testing of those new resolutions for people to be comfortable enough to say yes.
So one of those things that were kind of worked on during the voting window was automatic module naming. That was, even in the, if you read the no votes, it said a lot of work has been done at the time, and I think that's all positive work, but it was still a no vote. So if I understand right, the vote is actually on the JSR as submitted on the day that voting opened, correct?
That is correct, yes. And I dare say even if it had been on the submission of the last day of the vote, I still think there would have been enough. I still think people would have voted no regardless. Right. Those who did, even though some resolutions did come in, fairly late in that voting period, there certainly has not been enough time to test it all out yet. So.
I got the feel reading it that it was mostly about consensus that was the no vote, that there just wasn't consensus from the overall group. Is that accurate?
A couple of the EC members certainly felt that way. So it was very unusual that the review got posted to the EC in the first place. So the actual expert group members, none of them except for the spec leads thought that the JSR was ready to go to the vote. And I think that's what IBM in particular was referring to, is that it was a highly unusual situation that the expert group was not in consensus to go send this forward, which is naturally quite concerning. You would hope that a majority of an expert group was in alignment.
Yeah. So this isn't completely, though, without precedent, right? I think CDI, JSR 299, it was even mentioned in one of the no votes. It was delayed quite a bit with EE5, right?
Yep, that was quite some time ago now, but that's the only one I can think of in my memory that this has happened with. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing it doesn't happen too often. It shows that, a lot of due diligence and a lot of hard work does go into these specifications. And I think in this case, the EC has worked as intended. It must be incredibly frustrating for the Jigsaw team. And they've been working hard at this for 7 years now. And they've put in an awful lot of good work, and it's an extremely difficult piece of engineering. But that said, people outside of that team do have different communities and different viewpoints, which that team, simply isn't day-to-day aware of. And it's, the EC is sort of that last stopgap measure to make sure that there's that those communities are taken into account.
Sure, absolutely. So if you were to look at your crystal ball and look forward, what do you foresee happening in the next 30 days, 90 days, and a year forward?
So within the next 30 days, Mark Reinhold has already posted to the public mailing list for the module specification. He is going to be holding a daily call with all of the expert group members and other concerned parties to get through the last remaining issues. We ourselves at the London Java community are going to do some of the hands-on testing of these last-minute sort of issue resolutions. Sure. So we'll be holding hack days and making sure that what the spec says is actually implemented or implementable. And I see, it may even just be in about 14 days' time, we might even see a resubmission that quickly, actually.
What are some of the issues that are still outstanding?
We have not been able to successfully test the automatic modules, the new naming feature yet. So we would like to get that done.
Before you go to the next one, automatic module naming was one of the bigger contention points. Can you take a second and explain a bit about it?
Try and put it into the simplest terms possible. It's a way of, when you modularize your own application, but you rely on a bunch of third-party libraries which aren't modularized, that there's a very quick way for you to give them an automatic module name just so they can be loaded in as part of the module system. So it's sort of a temporary transition way of getting an existing third-party library in.
And that was one of the things that was proposed after the initial voting period was opened, right?
Yeah, so it had been proposed beforehand. It was just the particular implementation that had been initially proposed was one that wasn't very acceptable to the Maven people in particular.
Right.
And Maven being, the de facto place where everyone goes to get their third-party libraries.
It's kind of important.
It's kind of important, yeah.
Okay, so what about reflection? Has that issue been resolved?
Yeah, so reflection is effectively, it's not being blocked entirely, but there is stronger encapsulation inside the module system. So whereas in the traditional class path, you could use reflection as a free-for-all, depending on what the security manager lets you do. With the new module system, assuming you're running inside that module path system, it is a lot more restrictive. That is something which JBoss modules folks and OSGI folks are still unhappy about. Whether or not they can come to an agreement within the next 30 days or not, I'm not too sure. But I don't think, at least as far as the LJC is concerned, it's not something which would cause us to vote no on.
Yeah, that it's actually one of the questions. I mean, isn't that the point of going with Jigsaw, is to provide that better isolation? So reflection across those boundaries seems dangerous.
It is dangerous. That said, the argument from the OSGI and JBoss modules folks is that they work in extremely complicated environments. Sure. where sometimes pragmatically this just needs to happen. In my mind, that's perhaps just a case of, I think personally, perhaps that the new module system, in Java 10 perhaps, can look to find ways to securely open up the mechanisms that these other module systems need, without giving them the free-for-all access.
Right.
So I think a lot of people have the misconception that Jigsaw for Java 9 is that's the end of it. That will be all there is, and there won't be any further work done on the module system. But I'm pretty sure that Mark Reinhold and the rest of his team have got several more ideas and implementation details coming into Java 10 and 11 to make the module system more accessible.
Yeah. So you mentioned automatic module naming. We talked about reflection. Any other issues out there that could torpedo Jigsaw?
There's the one other major issue which does appear to have already been resolved is that the Eclipse compiler team, who create a true independent implementation of the Java compiler, at some stage during the voting period they popped up to them at various mailing lists and said they weren't confident they would be able to implement an independent implementation. And for that's the whole purpose of the JCP, right? It's the reason it exists is to make sure that specifications can be implementable by folks outside of Oracle in particular, or whoever is not the spec lead. So that was a blocker that has actually since been resolved. Alex Buckley from Oracle in particular really answered in great detail and has been working very hard with the Eclipse team to resolve those. And my understanding is, talking to the Eclipse lead on that team, is that they're happy going forwards.
Excellent. Okay, so you said about 14 days. With luck, we might get another vote, but within the next 30 days or so, probably 25 days or so, we should see another vote. And you feel it's going to go forward?
I certainly expect it to go forward. I do know that the JBoss modules and OSGI folks will still have some pretty strong positions that they want to defend and want to try and hopefully see some more compromise on. And so we'll just see what happens. There's been talk of things like only providing a switch which only lasts in Java 9, but perhaps some other ways where people get a more of a grace period to migrate.
A grace period certainly sounds interesting, but doesn't solve the root of the problems, I guess. Huh? Certainly a lot of work to be done in the next few weeks.
I think there's going to be a lot of hard work in the next couple of weeks. There's going to be a lot of intense debate, but it's kind of a unique community in that way, actually, in that you have so many different vendors and so many different interest groups. And they all actually have Java's best interests in heart, right? No one wants to see Java 9 delayed. That would be bad for everybody. But people really do want to make sure that Java is going to be around in the next 10, 15, 20 years' time. And we have to get the module system right, or right enough that we don't back ourselves into a corner that we can't get out of.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, thank you for taking the time to chat with me.
No problem. Thank you for your time.